The coffee cup shattered against the hangar floor. "Get that fossil out of my cockpit!" Major Bradley's voice cut through the morning air like shrapnel. Every head in the 8th Air Force Base turned. Every conversation stopped. Even the mechanics paused their wrench work to stare at the old man standing beside the B-17 Flying Fortress. Colonel James "Gramps" Morrison didn't flinch. At 62, his weathered hands stayed steady on his flight helmet. His gray hair caught the harsh fluorescent lights. His uniform hung loose on a frame that had shrunk with age. But his eyes still burned. "Sir, with respect," Morrison began. "Respect?" Bradley's face turned purple. "You want respect? You're 20 years past retirement, old man. This isn't a museum. This is 1943. This is war." The younger pilots snickered. Someone whispered "has been" loud enough for everyone to hear. Morrison's jaw tightened. A single drop of oil fell from the bomber's engine. It hit the concrete with a soft plop. Bradley stepped closer. "You flew mail runs in the Great War. Congratulations. But these aren't canvas biplanes, Grandpa. These are fortresses. They require reflexes, strength, things you lost when Coolidge was president." More laughter. Morrison's knuckles went white around his helmet. The truth was brutal. Morrison had volunteered for active duty after Pearl Harbor. They'd stuck him behind a desk, filing reports, stamping papers, watching real pilots fly real missions while he counted supply requisitions. "Pack your bags," Bradley continued. "You're shipping out to a training facility in Kansas, where you can teach farm boys how to read altimeters without endangering actual missions." The old man's shoulders sagged. For one terrible moment, he looked every one of his 62 years. Then the air raid sirens started screaming. "Luftwaffe! Incoming from the northeast!" The base exploded into chaos. Pilots sprinted toward their aircraft. Ground crews yanked wheel chocks. Engines roared to life across the tarmac. But there was a problem. "Sir!" Sergeant Collins ran up to Bradley, panic in his voice. "We're 3 pilots short. Lieutenant Murphy's in the hospital. Captain Ross crashed on landing yesterday. And Thompson—" "What about Thompson?" "Food poisoning, sir. Bad clams." Bradley's face went white. 3 bombers sat on the runway, fully loaded with fuel and bombs, ready for a critical mission to destroy a German aircraft factory in Schweinfurt. But without pilots, they were just expensive paperweights. The first wave of German fighters appeared on the horizon, black dots growing larger by the second. "We abort the mission," Bradley decided. "We can't risk—" "Sir." Morrison's voice was quiet, steady. "I can fly." Every eye turned to him. The old man stood straighter now. His hand moved to the wings pinned on his chest. Silver wings, tarnished with age, from a war most of these boys had only read about in history books. "Absolutely not," Bradley snapped. "You're not qualified on the B-17. You've never flown combat missions in—" "I logged 200 hours in the prototype," Morrison interrupted, "before they shipped me to that desk." A lie. He'd logged 50. But who was counting? "The factory must be destroyed today," Morrison continued. "Intelligence says they're moving production underground tomorrow. If we miss this window—" He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Everyone knew what happened when German aircraft production increased. More Messerschmitts, more Focke-Wulfs, more Allied bombers shot down, more dead pilots. Bradley hesitated. The German fighters were closer now, close enough to see their yellow nose markings. "Fine," he snarled. "But you're flying tail end Charlie. Last position, farthest from the action." Try not to get in the way of the real pilots." Morrison nodded. He walked toward the waiting bomber with measured steps. Behind him, someone muttered, "This is suicide." The old man climbed into the cockpit. His hands found the controls with muscle memory older than most of his crew. The engines coughed, then roared. For the first time in 25 years, Colonel James Morrison was going to war. They called it the Schweinfurt Run. 230 bombers, 3,000 airmen, the deepest penetration into German airspace attempted so far. Morrison's bomber, Memphis Belle Jr., flew at the back of the formation, where the old birds went to die quietly. The first hour passed without incident. Blue sky, white clouds, almost peaceful. Then the Messerschmitts arrived. They came out of the sun like angry hornets, sleek, fast, deadly. Their cannons opened up, stitching lines of fire across the sky. The first B-17 went down immediately, a direct hit to the cockpit. It spun earthward, trailing smoke and screams. "Bandits! Bandits everywhere!" The radio crackled with panic. Morrison watched the battle unfold through his windscreen. Young pilots in their first combat mission. Some froze. Some broke formation. Some died. His co-pilot, Lieutenant Davis, was 19 years old, fresh from flight school. His hands shook on the controls. "Colonel," Davis whispered, "what do we do?" Morrison's weathered fingers tightened on the yoke. 25 years of flying. 25 years of watching younger men fight his wars. 25 years of being told he was too old, too slow, too obsolete. Not today. "We do our job, son." The formation ahead was disintegrating. German fighters dove through the bomber stream like sharks through a school of fish. More fortresses fell. The radio filled with final transmissions. "This is Blue Leader. Going down. Tell my wife." Static. Major Bradley's voice cut through the chaos. "All aircraft. This is Wing Leader. We're taking heavy casualties. Any plane that can't maintain formation, turn back now." Morrison keyed his mic. "Wing Leader, this is Memphis Jr. We're staying." "Negative, Gramps. You're ordered to—" A Messerschmitt came at them head-on. Its guns flashed. Bullets punched through Memphis Jr.'s nose, missing Davis by inches. Morrison dropped the bomber into a diving turn. The maneuver was impossible. B-17s didn't dive like fighters. They couldn't turn like fighters. They were flying coffins, designed to absorb punishment, while their crews dropped bombs and prayed. But Morrison wasn't flying a B-17. He was flying memory, instinct. 25 years of aviation compressed into pure, crystallized skill. The Messerschmitt overshot. Morrison pulled up, lined up his guns, and squeezed the trigger. 50 caliber bullets tore into the German fighter's engine. It exploded in a ball of orange flame. Davis stared. "How did you—" "Eyes front, Lieutenant." More fighters came. Morrison met them all. His bomber danced through the sky like a fighter half its size. He used clouds for cover. He used the sun to blind his enemies. He used tricks that had been forgotten when most of his crew was learning to walk. But the real test was still coming. The target appeared through the haze. Schweinfurt, the heart of German aircraft production. Smokestacks and factory buildings spread across the valley like a steel cancer. The remaining bombers lined up for their attack runs. What had started as a formation of 200 was now barely 60 aircraft, and they were running straight into a wall of anti-aircraft fire. The sky exploded. Black puffs of flak filled the air like deadly flowers. Shrapnel tore through aluminum skin. Men screamed. Engines died. Morrison held his course. Steady, level, professional. "Bomb bay doors open," he called. "Open, sir." "Bombardier, you have the aircraft." "I have the aircraft, sir." Sergeant Peters, the bombardier, was 20 years old. This was his third mission, his first over Germany. Through the plexiglass nose, Peters could see the target, a massive complex of buildings and machinery, the source of hundreds of enemy fighters, the reason good men died every day. "Steady, steady!" A flak burst lifted the bomber 10 feet. Morrison fought the controls, keeping them level. "Bomb bay doors closing," Peters called. "Direct hit!" Below, the factory erupted in secondary explosions. Fuel, ammunition, parts and equipment worth millions of Reichsmarks. But they weren't clear yet. The return flight was a nightmare. German fighters harassed them all the way to the Channel. Flak followed them from every city. The formation that had left with 200 bombers limped home with 37. Morrison's Memphis Jr. was one of them. As they approached the English coast, Davis finally asked the question that had been burning in his mind for hours. "Colonel, how did you know to do all that? The turns, the defensive maneuvers, they don't teach that in flight school." Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Below them, the white cliffs of Dover grew larger. "They don't teach it anymore," he finally said. The debriefing room was packed. Every surviving pilot and crew member squeezed into the small space. Major Bradley stood at the front, his earlier arrogance replaced by something that looked almost like shame. "Gentlemen," he began, "today's mission was a success. The Schweinfurt factory is destroyed, but the cost—" He didn't finish. Everyone knew the cost. 163 bombers shot down, over 1,600 airmen killed, wounded, or missing. "However," Bradley continued, "there is one bright spot, one aircraft and crew that exceeded all expectations." He looked directly at Morrison. "Colonel Morrison, would you stand?" The old man rose slowly. Every eye in the room focused on him. Colonel Morrison's bomber not only completed the mission successfully, but also shot down 4 enemy fighters and assisted 2 damaged aircraft in returning home safely. Murmurs rippled through the room. 4 kills was impressive for any pilot. For a has-been flying his first combat mission in 25 years, it was impossible. "Sir," Lieutenant Davis spoke up. "Permission to speak freely?" Bradley nodded. "Colonel Morrison isn't just any pilot. I did some research after we landed." Davis pulled out a folder. "Colonel James Morrison, Silver Star, Distinguished Flying Cross, ace pilot with 12 confirmed kills." The room went silent. "But that's not the impressive part," Davis continued. "Those medals, those kills, they're from 1918. Colonel Morrison was one of the youngest aces of World War I. He was flying combat missions when he was 19 years old." Bradley's face went white. That's impossible." "He said he flew mail runs." "He did," Davis confirmed. "After the war. But during the war—" He pulled out a photograph, black and white, faded with age. A young man in a leather flying jacket standing beside a biplane. The resemblance to Morrison was unmistakable. During the war, he was one of the best fighter pilots America ever produced. The room erupted. Questions, exclamations, disbelief. Morrison remained standing, silent, letting the truth sink in. Finally, Bradley found his voice. "Colonel, why didn't you tell us?" The old man's eyes swept the room, past the young faces, past the medals and uniforms, past the present moment to something deeper. Would it have mattered? The question hung in the air like smoke. "You saw an old man," A has-been. Someone taking up space that belonged to a younger, better pilot. Morrison's voice was steady, quiet. You weren't wrong. I am old. My reflexes are slower. My eyes aren't as sharp. He paused. But I've been flying longer than most of you have been alive. I've seen dogfights and bombing runs and missions that went wrong in every way imaginable. Experience isn't about age. It's about survival. Another pause. And sometimes, survival is exactly what a mission needs. The story should have ended there. Old pilot proves himself. Young pilots learn respect. Everyone goes home happy. But war doesn't care about clean endings. 3 days later, Morrison received orders. Not to Kansas, not to a training facility, to the Pacific Theater, where the Japanese Zero was cutting Allied pilots out of the sky like wheat before a scythe. Sir, Davis approached him at the transport plane. Permission to transfer to your unit? Morrison smiled. Denied, Lieutenant. You're needed here. But sir, the next generation of pilots needs teachers, son. Real teachers, not has-beens who got lucky. Davis started to protest, but Morrison was already walking toward the transport. His sea bag slung over one shoulder. His flight jacket zipped against the English cold. At the plane's door, he turned back. Take care of Memphis Jr. for me. Sir, what if they ask about you? What if they want to know about the old pilot who came out of nowhere? Morrison's eyes crinkled at the corners. For just a moment, he looked like the 19-year-old fighter ace from the photograph. Tell them the truth, Lieutenant. Tell them that sometimes the oldest dogs know the best tricks. The transport plane's engines roared to life. Morrison climbed aboard without looking back. 6 months later, news would filter back from the Pacific. Colonel Morrison had shot down 8 Japanese fighters before his plane was hit by anti-aircraft fire over Guadalcanal. He'd managed to crash land in friendly territory, saving his crew. He'd been awarded another Distinguished Flying Cross, posthumously. The official report listed his age as 42, a clerical error, they claimed. But Lieutenant Davis knew better. He kept the photograph of the young ace on his desk. Next to it, he placed a picture from Morrison's final mission briefing. Same eyes, same quiet determination. 62 years old, flying combat missions like a man 1/3 his age. When new pilots arrived at the base, Davis would tell them the story. About the old man they'd called a has-been. About the mission that should have been impossible. About the ace who proved that legends never really die. They just wait for the right moment to fly again. The hangar where Morrison had been humiliated still stood. Someone had painted words on the wall next to where his coffee cup had shattered. Age and treachery will always overcome youth and skill. Below that, in smaller letters, Colonel James Morrison, 1881 to 1943, Ace. Every morning, young pilots would read those words before their missions. And sometimes, when the sky was dark and the odds were impossible, they'd remember the old man who'd shown them that heroes come in all ages, even 62.